Hello and welcome to some more Starters, and today I wanted to talk about travelling in the verse in the up-and-coming Alpha 3.0 and the future after that, I suppose, as well. The navigation systems, Nav Beacons, and a little bit more about service beacons, which are a little bit different, but kind of connected a bit. So Star Citizen's persistent universe will be filled with lots of locations, some known and common, like Port Olisar, some discoverable once you've travelled there or fulfilled certain criteria, like Grimhex, and some other more situational points of interest, like missions that Tessa gives you, for example, or mission-based coordinates. So these are normally linked to points of interest, mission coordinates, or commonly travelled nav points, server-placed beacons, think of them. This will also make up a lot of the common travel routes for players and NPCs, whether they are doing cargo runs or returning to a safe port. We're also going to have the Star Map app for our Mobiglass. In Alpha 3.0, the Star Map will be introduced to allow players to view the persistent universe at large, the whole map, the whole system, and select planets and points of interest to quantum travel to. This should be used in conjunction with our quantum drives to save some major locations that we find as well. Now, there's also going to be player nav beacons, so players can place their own nav beacons around the persistent universe in space or on the ground. These player-based beacons will allow you to quantum travel or a bookmark marker for you to travel to. They are physical objects that persist in-game. Beacons will have a maximum range, and objects like planets and moons or nebula or asteroids, gas clouds, they can reduce the range at which a quantum travel marker is usable or prevent their use altogether. And we'll talk a little tiny bit about orbits in a minute, because there's going to be certain plans and distances and changes that mean that these quantum travel markers might not be seen at certain points in the future anyway. This creates obstacles that players must navigate to travel to a selected destination, or different routes that they might have to take at different times. Player beacons must be maintained as well. They have a service period that must be visited within that period to reset the timer. Basically, you're replacing the power supply or replacing damaged components. Otherwise, they're going to despawn. Beacons can be placed on the ground or in space, so beacons can be placed anywhere that's not within like the major airspace of landing zones. They take up a missile slot, and when you launch them, they clear the proximity of your ship. They're kind of like a mine, they've been described as, and players on the ground will need to launch these beacons slightly more carefully from their ships, because firing too close or far from a location could damage or destroy your beacon. And I suppose that's going to be the same if you're firing your beacon at a ship that you want to mark for salvage. If you fire it too close, then it might get destroyed against that ship. So players are going to be able to share these beacon locations with their friends if they wish to, and their friends will be able to change the power supply for them if they want, or just travel to them. Other players can scan down and find the beacons, and they can then choose to travel to them for the future, sell the info to pirates or other players, or destroy them if they choose to. Eventually, the plan is to have more busy player beacons and travel locations kind of attract more pirate attention as well. And I suspect that beacons that are more travelled by players as well might even be more obvious to track down by players. Distances. So another important thing to talk about with travelling in the verse is distances and travel time. The intention from CIG is to have travelling between locations meaningful and with various things happening during that journey. So parts of your ship could fail or require replacing. Pirates might attack you, you might see distress signals, or you might want to avoid certain routes, or you might detect new points of interest on the way. They want to avoid tedious travel, but they've talked about quantum travel speeds being 0.2c, the 0.2 the speed of light, and system sizes being around 1/8 scale, but this can and will be tweaked to make travel times between short and long distances kind of reasonable. This is very much still being fleshed out, and in 3.0 expect travel times to be a few minutes or less even at the longest distances. Noobify actually has a really great video, How Long Should Travel Take? Check that out, links below. He's got some quite good insight into that. It's also important to mention that when orbits are added, and that's a possibility for 3.0, that nav beacons and the changing dynamic of the system is going to be an interesting gameplay kind of mechanic. We're going to see probably nav beacons travelling with the object container that they are placed in, but we'll have to see how they implement that in the future. Service beacons. So service beacons have been mentioned before. Now, I'd prefer these to be called service requests, because service beacons is a little bit incorrect term for that. So service beacons work with mobiGlas and the mission board app. These are going to allow players to call for assistance. Broadly speaking, this allows for distress signals, fuel requests, escorts, and pickup requests from other players. Service beacons will appear on the mission board mobiGlas app for other players to accept, the idea being that players can openly broadcast their location and what they require, a reward for completing that as well, and that's all going to appear on the mobiGlas mission board app and be enforced by that, I believe. I suspect that this will allow for much easier group play in public matches, or more public PU, getting players to join in with you completing missions that you wouldn't otherwise know or have talked to. This can be hunting pirates as well, convoy escorts, or for any other reason, and should allow the sharing of Alpha UEC, I suspect, as well. We should see an early version of service beacons and this kind of player set requests in Alpha 3.0, or at least may see that, and evolutions of that system are planned for Alpha 3.1 and 3.2 already. I really hope that they do change the name to service requests, and I hope that you can filter so that players with Starfarer transponders are the players that get to see your refuel requests, and only players with a certain reputation, for example, can see a request if you so choose to do that. It might take longer to find a player to respond to your signal, but you're going to get a much better filtered response. I also like to see all requests appear if I'm scanning for signals as a pirate. Maybe not see what those signals are for, but see, oh, someone is over here asking for a request. I don't know what that request is, but they're in distress maybe. Nom nom, I'm a pirate. The systems that are being fleshed out for this will go through lots of iteration and evolution through the next few patches of Star Citizen. But it's important for us to find our own kind of path in our adventure sandbox universe, and with that we have powerful travelling options, and for players to have their own bookmarking ability, and for them to share that with other players, as well as ways of requesting and organising service, and lots of emergent gameplay happening based on player responses, and whether you're going to have pirates and that sort of stuff as well. It is very much an adventure. Alpha 3.0 is going to give us much more ways of travelling around the verse in this ever-expanding universe. It should be large enough for these methods to be required. Every month we try to give away a ship. For June, it is a Freelancer DUR, donated by the epic Stormfire962. Thank you very much for that. You're a legend and a scholar and a gent. All you need to do is be subscribed to my YouTube channel and comment on any of my Star Citizen videos during that month. Do you have any questions for me about Nav Beacons, about service beacons, or about Star Citizen in general? I am going to a office tour in Foundry 42 on the 30th of June, and I'll also be interviewing Aaron Roberts at that time. If you've got any questions or ideas for that as well, please drop them in below. I will look through a lot of them, ask questions to relevant people, and that sort of jazz while I am down there, and share anything that I am allowed to. A special thanks to my Patreons who allow me to create the amount of content I do, and to travel to such places like Foundry 42 in the UK and do interviews and things. If you are interested in becoming one of them, please check out the links, as well as everything else we've talked about, links to that below. Thanks guys, you're all stars. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, as it really does help me, and I will see you in the verse.